Leader has a vision of where you're trying to go to. So you're on a road, you're on a destination to get to the end of this. And not everyone's going to arrive there today. Some might have got there in February, some might have got there last week, right? But the job is to get everybody to the destination at whatever time frame you have.
Hi there and welcome to Bamboo Podcast. I will speak for 2 minutes in Italian and then the episode will continue in English. Mi chiamo Alessandro Candusso e sono un mental coach che lavora con giocatori professionisti di pallacanestro. L'episodio di oggi è davvero speciale. E per un episodio così speciale non poteva che esserci un super ospite. Si tratta di Jamion Christian, l'allenatore della Pallacanestro Trieste, che ha vinto il campionato di Lega 2 ed è stata appena promossa in Serie A. Durante gli ultimi anni, facendo questo lavoro, ho avuto l'opportunità di conoscere un sacco di staff, di persone che lavorano appunto nel mondo della pallacanestro. E alcune di questi ti assicuro che erano veramente speciali. E Jamion Christian è sicuramente una di queste persone che ha quel qualcosina in più ed è assolutamente innovativo per come alleniamo solitamente in Italia. La storia che sentirete qui all'interno di questo episodio oggi è unica. Durante l'ultima stagione sono stato a trovarlo diverse volte in palazzetto e dall'interno ho potuto notare delle dinamiche che secondo me sono uniche e non si trovano in altre squadre in Italia. Seppur i playoff sono andati alla grandissima, infatti Trieste ha vinto 9 delle 10 partite che ha disputato e la maggior parte le ha giocate fuori casa, la stagione e il percorso che ha fatto questa squadra ti assicuro che non è stato per nulla semplice. Infatti Trieste durante il 2024 nella regular season ha vinto solo 6 partite su 16 giocate. Ma cos'è che è cambiato nella squadra? E come ha fatto Jamion a tenere il gruppo unito e farlo arrivare ai playoff così solido, così forte? Scoprirete questo e tanto altro all'interno di questi 3 episodi che usciranno. Questo qui è il primo dei 3 episodi che usciranno. Quello che ti consiglio è di metterti semplicemente comodo e goderti questo contenuto. Ultimissima nota, anche questa molto importante, l'episodio sarà interamente tenuto in inglese, per cui 2 cose. La prima è che sbaglierò qualche parola, qualche frase, perdonami, non sono madrelingua. La seconda è che ti consiglio di attivare i sottotitoli, così anche se sei italiano puoi seguire comunque la conversazione. Detto questo, partiamo!
Sei pronto a risvegliare il leone che è dentro di te? Io sono Alessandro Candusso e benvenuto su Bamboo Podcast. Assieme esploreremo la mentalità e le strategie che ti permetteranno di raggiungere la tua definizione di successo. Non importa che tu sia un giocatore di pallacanestro che vuole arrivare in Serie A o un freelancer che vuole guadagnare di più, che tu voglia trovare la tua prima ragazza o che tu voglia migliorare la tua autostima. Sei nel posto giusto.
Ciao a tutti, sono Alessandro Candusso. Oggi siamo qua con Jamion Christian dal Pallacanestro Trieste e oggi faremo un'intervista speciale perché Jamion Christian, a parte che sarà in inglese non sarà in italiano, quindi un episodio un po' diverso dal solito, è Christian con la squadra di Trieste, quest'anno ha vinto il campionato di Lega 2, quindi parleremo in inglese e hi Christian.
Great to see you. Thanks for having me. I'm excited for the first chance to talk about this season with you.
Thank you very much for being here. And I would like to start this conversation knowing better who you are, like your story. Why are you in Trieste?
Yeah, oh, man, number one, I'm a guy who loves basketball. And, I remember the first time I picked the basketball up, the first time I was able to make a basket, that energy that I felt. And I've just never lost that energy. And, my parents are both educators. My brother actually was part of this Boston Celtics NBA championship team last night, so we're excited about that. So we have like this family of educators that have all kind of gone into coaching and teaching. And so our foundation as a family is very different than most. I always say our dinner conversations were really about what they were trying to do for their students and the limitations their students were having and the ways that they're going to be able to help their students overachieve or achieve at a certain level. And so why am I in Trieste? I'm in Trieste because I've always wanted to coach an international basketball team. I've always wanted to be a part of a really elite organization with people with big vision, with big goals. And I got the opportunity to work with Mike Archieri. He brought me here to Trieste, and I'm really happy that we were able to put together a tremendously successful first season.
Thank you very much for the explanation. And what did you do when you were in America, which is like your background?
Yeah, oh, man. So I was a good high school player. I played college basketball at Mount St. Mary's. I was a good high school player. I was a Virginia State Player of the Year in Virginia.
Were you like a guard?
I was a guy who loved to get everyone involved. I loved to just, I had to become a scorer when I got to college, but I loved passing the ball, and I loved everyone feeling really a part of being a part of the team. And every team I've been on, I've basically been the captain or the leader. So there's a lot of traits from that I take into head coaching. And so I was a good player, but not good enough to continue to play overseas. So then I go work at a Division III school, Emory and Henry College, then the Bucknell, which is in the Patriot League, then William & Mary, which is in CAA, VCU with a well-known coach in the States named Shaka Smart. And then from VCU, I became a head coach at 29 years old at Mount St. Mary's. We were in the NCAA tournament at 31 years old, and we were in the NCAA tournament again at 35 years old. Then I took a year at Siena, and then 3 years at George Washington, and then I found my way here into the pro game, to one of the best basketball cities here in Italy.
And how was that? Like, how were you able from America to get in touch with Archieri?
Yeah, so it's funny. I was doing one of these back home. I was doing a podcast. I had a
like this one.
Yeah, like this one. I had a year in between, and we'll talk about the year in between, which I think helped me become a better coach. I had a year in between coming to Trieste and finishing up at George Washington. And there was a question that I was really trying to figure out, and it was like, how could I do this better? Like if you looked at my Wikipedia page, you would say, this guy was a pretty successful college basketball coach. But I just felt like along the way of trying to become a really good college basketball coach, I lost my way a little bit. I lost the ability to enjoy the game, the ability to enjoy my players every single day. And so my question that started me into podcasting was, how could I do this better? And how could I find the best version of myself? And I felt like the best way to do that was going to be to interview others that I thought were better, or I thought brought a component to their work that I admired or I wanted to aspire to be. And so it brought me to a podcast. And in that podcast process, I interviewed Michael. And I was, from day one, when I talked to Michael, I was amazed. It's interesting. We always say iron sharpens iron. And you need really sharp people around you to be your very best. And it keeps raising the standard. And I remember having the interview with Michael and going downstairs afterwards to talk to my wife. And I told her, I said, why can't I work with someone like that? And I just had this feeling like this person is incredible in his vision and his leadership and his temperament. I loved his journey to get to where he is now. He's really had to work for that opportunity, so he values it. And so when he called me end of June last year, that he was coming here and he had a new opportunity, I didn't know much about Trieste, but I knew about him as a man and as a leader. And I knew I wanted to work with him.
Okay. So you taught me a lot about leadership, actually. Yeah. And it's one of the traits that I like about you the most, because I found you really during the training that you have leadership, not with the shouting, just being with presence, being there. Like, how did you develop this kind of leadership? You told me a bit about even like when you were a player, I think a playmaker, you were a player.
Absolutely.
Okay. So how did you develop this kind of leadership? Because it's really powerful. I can feel that, even in the team.
Well, I think it's important for our audience to know, you probably come to practice every 2 weeks or so, every 3 weeks or so. So you're one of the few people that had a viewpoint of the process and how it was going along. And one of the few people that had a little bit different perspective, just because you were seeing the work every single day and you were seeing the energy every single day. People always hear me say this, like, you either coach how you were coached or you coach how you want it to be coached. And when I'm coaching, I'm not trying to be someone else. I want to be 100% genuinely who I am. And I always wanted to be coached, number one, in an environment that allowed me to become my very best. And that environment includes the people that you work with every day. That environment includes the style of play and the things that you're going to do. That environment includes being in a place where you can make mistakes and recover from those mistakes. It's really hard to become a great player if every time you make a mistake, you're being criticized for it. There's certainly a point where you have to criticize on the mistakes. Mm-hmm. I would like to coach through the mistakes, right? So when you talk about environment, a turnover, well, was it a bad decision? Was it careless with the basketball? Was it bad ball placement, right? Like, I look at it that way, and there is no emotion in dividing it up in those three ways, right? I obviously don't want our players to turn the ball over. No one does. But if I can break it up into those 3 points, I can then develop a teaching strategy to help them become better in those areas. I do think that took a while for our players to get adjusted to, because I think they're really, I would say they're used to rod and staff, make a mistake, punish right away. And for me, it's really more about like, can I evaluate why they're making that mistake and if they're consistently making that mistake? And if we can figure out why they're making that mistake and the root problem of that, then I can coach them on that. We can coach them on that. It's important. So I say the first thing is environment. Number two, I wanted to be with people that really embrace my soul and wanted to inspire my soul on a day-to-day basis. I think the ability to, build that competitive spirit is everything. And my responsibility as a head coach is to make sure that our spirit is being grown every single day when guys walk into the gym. We practiced this year probably 240 times. That's a lot of practices, right?
It is.
Yeah, it's a lot of practice, right?
It is.
And I want our spirit to feel that way, and I want our organization's spirit to feel that way. There were certainly days I walked in the building and we were struggling, and I'm sure people in the building would say, man, every day he's like upbeat, and he's, but that's my responsibility when I walk across those doors, is to make sure that everybody knows that I believe there's a plan in place and there's a spirit that needs to be embodied on a day-to-day basis. And so I think, you talk about environment and you talk about spirit, and I always wanted to be in environments where those two things were appreciated, were pushed to the forefront, and where people really made that a priority.
Like you talked about spirit. Yeah. That for me is like presence, being there with the people and being open to listen and experience them. Yeah. And like in Italy, we have not this culture. It's pretty different. Like here in Trieste, I saw a different environment that I didn't expect in Italy actually, and I think that the management that is from US is like helping it. Yeah. Like, how can you create this kind of spirit in a place where people are not used to it? Yeah. Like, I'm talking especially about the players. Yeah. Because players, as you told, like they are pretty used to tough coaches that are like screaming, shouting when they are doing mistake. And how were you able to change and to adapt their mentality to this kind of new vision and way to coach? Yeah. But for me, it was like the key point, the key strategy that helped you to win this championship this year.
Yeah, and you had a front row seat to it. It's interesting. I think, is it about yelling and being tough, or is it about holding them accountable? Right? And I think you can hold people accountable in different ways. For me, it starts with like the relationship building of trying to create the environment the way we need to get it. Every one of the players in that locker room, they need something else. They need something different from me, and they need something different from our coaching staff. The job for me is trying to figure out what they need from me, how they need me to deliver the information.
That's huge.
Right. I mean, so you talk about listening. I mean, from the first moment that we started asking these guys to come back here, we were trying to listen. What did they say was most important to them? How are they living? That shows what's most important to them. Making sure as an organization we're in daily conversations about what's important to the players, what's motivating them. So I think the listening is particularly important. Because it's just better when when everyone feels involved in everything that you're doing, when everyone feels responsible. Like I would tell our guys before the game, I bet you our players could tell you, I bet you if you see our players on the street, you could say, what's coach's pregame? And they could tell it to you word for word. But it always would start with trust. And the big part of the trust is trust that we can figure this problem out together. No matter what defense they're going to play or offense they're going to play, just trust that we can figure it all out together. That the men in the room have the ability to ask the questions that need to be asked and to make the adjustments that need to be adjusted to. And so, I always start everything with that. And trust is so interesting because we're talking about listening. You only tell people important things if you trust what they're gonna do with the information. So it took us a while just to build that kind of trust, right? Like, I'm not gonna tell you something heartfelt unless I trust that you're not gonna use it to hurt me. And so it took us a while just to get everyone to understand that we just want to find a way to make you better and make you your very best. That, what you share with me, I'm not going to then turn around and use against you. And, I just want to try to help you be the best you can be. And I think we have that as an organizational mindset, So the original question is, how do you do that in a place where that's not common? I think you stay consistent with it. As a leader, you have to recognize not just where you want to go, but where everyone else is. And recognizing where they are isn't a detriment to any side of it. A leader has a vision of where you're trying to go to. So if you're on a road, you're on a destination to get to the end of this. And not everyone's going to arrive there today. Some might have got there in February, some might have got there last week, right? But the job is to get everybody to the destination at whatever time frame you have. And so just trying to understand where the players are, trying to listen to them to understand what they're used to. You think about in a locker room, you have, 10 to 12 players. They all come from 10 to 12 different foundations of what leadership looks like, of what accountability looks like, of what toughness looks like, what caring looks like, what appreciation looks like. They all have different foundations. What you want to try to do is you want to try to funnel those into one belief of how things should be done. And if you start yelling and screaming from day one, you're not going to be able to get everybody down that funnel so they can have that great belief. And so, again, the original question, for me, it's like just really understanding where they are, understanding the challenges that they are going through, listening to their challenges, not taking their challenges on critically, not emotionally, just, this person's at this point in the path and I have to figure out a way to clear the rocks for them to get over it, to get through it, and to help them figure that out. I just think taking that mindset on a day-to-day basis, staying consistently with it, really allowed for our players to put together an amazing season with really tremendous perseverance.
I see that. And actually, I think that what you are saying is something that for you, I don't want to tell that is normal, but it's like you internalized it. For Italy, I think that is a kind of a revolution for what we are used to. Because actually you are saying that if you want to be a leader, it's not that you are strong, powerful, and people will just follow. Like you open yourself to people that are around you, and because of this, because you build the trust, because they start to understand what's your true goal is, like they start to follow you. So it's the opposite. It's not like you lead because you're strong and powerful. You open people up and they will trust you and they will follow you. And that's huge, like a team built like this, and not like with the strict directive from above. It's like a revolution. So it's really huge, actually.
It's interesting, I think, when we think about like how you want to build, we call it elite team status, but how you want to build something that's elite. It's, do you want to be the oak tree that when the wind blows, you crack and you break? Or do you want to be like the water that can crash when it needs to crash, or turn when it needs to turn, or hydrate you when you need to hydrate? Like, again, I believe deeply in leadership. And I believe leadership is done in a lot of different ways. And I think different things are needed at different moments, you know? But my viewpoint is, you know, leadership really starts with trying to figure out what everybody needs from you. You know, like I say a prayer before every game. I ask God to give me the strength to say what needs to be said, to do what needs to be done, and to be what the men need me to be, right? And, you know, in that moment, they might need me to be irate, but I may not feel irate. I may feel pretty calm. Hey, we're in a pretty good place. But it's not about me. It's about what they need from me. And so just trying to be in a place where you can constantly feel that, adjust to that, and be what they need you to be by being consistently who you are. You know, one thing with me is like, I'm like really confident in who I am, you know? And I do feel like sometimes you go against coaches who are trying to emulate other coaches, or they're trying to prove themselves to something else. Like I was telling my buddies this back home, you know, I've coached to prove something. I've coached to keep something. I've coached to earn more. And this year I really had a chance to coach to be where my feet are and not to be worried about anything that's ahead of me or behind me. And by far, coaching where your feet are is the most enjoyable thing, even with the highs and the lows, because you can just constantly find the motivation that you need. You know, you're not adding extra weight to the journey because you're just trying to take on today's challenges. And you know today's going to have some different challenges than yesterday. And so you're just taking those on and you're leaving the challenges from yesterday behind you. You know, you're taking those, you're making them almost like a little zip disk because it's a little learning for you. And so you learn from that and you put it in there and you kind of go on to the next day. And I feel like a lot of coaches, a lot of leaders, you know, they're just, their motivation, you know, the gas they're putting into their gas tank is tainted because it's filled with over ambition or a need for something else. You know, this year I was just like, I'm just trying to be the very best I can be. And I felt confident that if I did that, I could help our organization, help our team.
And you did.
Right. And so that was kind of the thing, is like just trying to stay genuinely who you are. And I'm always trying to encourage our players, anyone in leadership, learn who you are so you can genuinely be who you are. And I think that's the best way to be able to connect with people in a true way.
I think so, actually. Like who you are actually are.
Yeah.
That's huge. And you talked a bit about buttons, like buttons that you can push on player in order to get what they need to express in that moment. Which kind of button do you think that you can press on a player?
Yeah, you know, when you're connected with them, you know all the buttons, you know. And you know, I would say I told Michael this early in the year, and we were playing well. Man, we had an 8-game winning streak early in the season. And I just told him, I said, man, I'm not close enough to the guys to have the conversations that I need to have with them yet. Like my worry when we won like 7 or 8 in a row wasn't that we weren't good enough. I knew we were good enough. It was...
That's all for today's episode. If you are willing to see the second part of this series, remember to subscribe to my channel and to activate the bell in order to be notified when the second part will be out. Leave a like if you enjoyed the episode and see you on the next one.